It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I'm amped up to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Dave Brock, founder of Partners in Excellence. He's a great blogger, sales coach, consultant, speaker, and most significantly, author of a great new book called The Sales Manager's Survival Guide, Lessons from Sales Frontlines. Dave, welcome back to Accelerate.
Thanks, Andy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You do such a great job on these programs. I feel flattered to participate.
Well, thanks for joining me again. So, maybe people didn't hear your first episode on the show, so take a second, introduce yourself, maybe tell us how you got your start in sales.
Oh, super. Yeah, it's, again, Dave Brock. I run a company called Partners in Excellence. I got my start in sales in kind of an obscure way. I was actually in the PhD program for physics at Berkeley and never thought of being a salesperson, got involved in a startup. The startup failed, and I realized, business is more than about great products. And so I decided I wanted to learn sales and marketing and business. Went to the dark side, ended up working for IBM, selling mainframe computers in New York City.
The dark side of the force, yeah.
So, well, I mean, particularly for a physicist
right.
or an engineer, going to sales is the dark side, but going to, at the time, IBM with mainframe computers in Manhattan is the darkest of all dark sides you could go to. So
I guess the first question I had is, how far into your PhD program did you get? So how disappointed were your parents when you said you weren't going to finish that PhD?
I don't know that they were disappointed in that because they were helping me fund part of it. But and I think the PhD may have been more interest in science and those kinds of things, but also not knowing what I wanted to be when I grew up. But so I don't think they were disappointed. I know they questioned me a little bit about IBM because my dad was a business executive, but he'd had some dealings with IBM that didn't make him real happy. So I think he questioned me about IBM a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So you're working at IBM in Manhattan, selling mainframe systems, and then you ended up with your own company.
Yeah. I ended up, as one would, I ended up going up through the management ranks and ended up managing a division of IBM, and then ended up working in the chairman's office, kind of in the dark days of IBM, where you looked in the tunnel and there wasn't light at the end of the tunnel, or it was very, very dim. At the time, I was recruited away to do a turnaround of a technology company on the West Coast. As EVP of sales, went and did that, and the what I ended up loving was in the turnaround we were really transforming the organization. I mean, transforming from some tragic things that prior sales management had done. And I had to go through the experience of laying off 1,000 people and affecting 1,000 families. And I write about that a little bit in the book. But, I learned so much in that transformation experience. I started doing a bunch of turnarounds and then figured out how to systematize that. And that's building my own company called Partners in Excellence. So we do a lot of business strategy, sales, marketing, all kind of customer-facing types of things, and saying, how do we grow our organizations? How do we build our capability to connect with the customer in new and value-based ways? And how do we really drive profound growth? So it's either you see high-performing organizations trying to say, what do we do next and how do we continue to grow? Or troubled organizations that are saying, how do we survive? How do we change? And how do we move from there?
Okay, so speaking of survival, I mean, you've written this book, The Sales Manager's Survival Guide, an excellent book. Mm-hmm. So first question I guess I have for you is, what's the tougher job, being a sales rep or a frontline sales manager?
I think it all depends on your perspective, but in reality, I think the really toughest job in sales right now is the job of the frontline sales manager, because the frontline sales manager is always caught between a rock and a hard place. They're always caught between serving their people and helping their people and serving the business and doing what executive management wants to do. And it's that difficult point where you translate the strategy and the programs and the things that the organization wants to do and says they have to do to grow to execution. And it's how do I get each one of my people doing the right things with the right people at the right time? How do I get each one of my people performing at the highest levels possible? So, it's that kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's that translation of corporate strategy into day-to-day execution, which is, I think, what makes the job of the frontline sales manager so challenging.
It seems though it's like one of the contributing causes, though, to some of the issues we see with frontline managers, which is that, especially given the availability of all this data about sales now, is that we seem to be more relying on scripted, automated processes and moving away from a lot of what you talk about, which is sort of this, person-to-person selling.
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion around what's your sales model, what's your go-to-customer model, and a lot of the SaaS-based kind of high volume, high velocity sales approaches are getting a lot of talk right now because they're new, fresh, and you see companies growing wildly and implementing them. Of course, growing from $1 million company to a $2 million company is very different from growing from $1 billion company to a $1.1 billion company. Mm-hmm. So there's some differences there, but I think that regardless of your sales model, you still need strong leadership and strong personal leadership to really drive performance. So it's if you're a manager and you're managing a team of SDRs, or if you're a manager and you're managing a team of inside salespeople, or you're managing channel managers, or you're managing territory reps, or managing account managers, the issues, while different, are the same. The issue is my job as a manager is to maximize the performance of those people in their jobs. So how do I look at my team of SDRs and each person in that team and say, how do I look at, say, Andy, maybe you're one of my SDRs. How do I look at what you're really good at and help you become better at that? And what are the things that you need to improve in being an SDR? And how can I help you get better?
Well, I think that really speaks to one of the questions that I hear frequently from people and admittedly somewhat in the tech-driven SaaS world and so on, is that given the way these sort of strict processes are laid down, is they're wondering how they bring to bear their individual strengths that might be slightly at variance from this process that's documented and laid out. But how do they bring their individual strengths to bear? And how does a manager help them do that?
Well, and I think it is, if we could do these things as automatons, we would introduce machines that do that and machine voices that do that prospecting and so on and so forth. The point is we can't. This is a people-to-people business, whether it's an SDR calling a prospect trying to get an appointment, or a global account manager calling on somebody trying to qualify a big deal. This is a people-to-people thing. So we're dealing with people who deal with people. And each person, because we're people, we have imperfections. So each person has different strengths and different weaknesses. And the trick of the sales manager's job is to start recognizing that and figuring out how we build upon, again, those strengths and diminish those weaknesses.
Yeah, to move beyond the metrics and managing people to the person-to-person coaching.
Exactly. And I think too many people rely too strongly on the metrics, whether you aren't making enough calls per day, your pipeline looks like garbage, and so on and so forth. What they aren't doing is they aren't saying the metrics are just an indicator of a potential problem area or a potential opportunity area. How do I peel those back and understand what's really going on? So what's really going on with one person's effectiveness in making prospecting calls may be very different than another person. And, it's my job as a manager to decode that and work with each person as an individual.
So one of the things we're seeing with the influx of data into sales and so on is really different career paths for people becoming sales managers. So, in general, your opinion, where's the best place to find your sales managers? I mean, is it from the ranks of sales, or is it somebody that's been doing something else?
Clearly, we've seen some successes in each. So I think a lot of it is mindset and ability to learn. I mean, but pragmatically is, I would tend to recruit from within sales. I mean, you can't be a good sales manager unless you really understand what, particularly a frontline sales manager, unless you really understand selling. And it's not just the theory of selling, but it's the practice and the reality of selling. It's, how do you deal with the frustrations that we all face every day? How do you deal with the rejection? Unless you've had some experience and some feeling for that, you can't establish that empathy that's so critical in managing your people. So I think having some experience is critical to your effectiveness as a sales manager and to establishing credibility with your team. At the same time, I think one of the mistakes we make is we try and take our very highest performing salesperson and put them into a sales management job where they may be the wrong person. So, as you start looking at the characteristics and competencies of a good frontline sales manager, it's not just their past experience in selling. I've seen people that were okay, not outstanding salespeople who are stunning managers. So, they have that knowledge of selling, but they have that knowledge of that business management piece to understand how to look at people, how to look at businesses, analyze, understand them, and how to identify problems and how to assess people and start to improve their performance. They have that coaching expertise, they have that empathy, and so on and so forth. So as we look at managers, there are a whole bunch of competencies and characteristics we're looking at for great sales managers. And being a great salesperson is one, but not necessarily the important one.
Right, and I think that as it gets back to senior level executives and higher level managers saying, look, there's another way to reward our top performers other than making them managers.
That's exactly it, and one thing. I respect organizations like IBM and some very, very large organizations where you look at basically multiple career paths. As a young salesperson in IBM, I had multiple career paths I could go on. I could go from a salesperson and individual contributor up the management chain, which is what I chose to do. I could grow as a salesperson and individual contributor up to very, very senior sales roles who had huge
account responsibility,
huge account responsibility, huge levels of performance, and who were sought after by the top executives to say, what should we be doing with this account, or what should we be doing to address these issues? So they had huge levels of responsibility, and there are alternatives. I could have gone into marketing or finance or other kinds of things. So I think as we start as organizations need to address this whole issue of career pathing. One of the reasons we see such high turnover, I think, in sales organizations today, I think what the average turnover is something around 25 to 30 months, is part of it is, in particular among millennials, is they don't see any future for themselves. It's how do I grow? How do I develop? Where do I go in my career? And too many organizations don't show that here's where you can go. Here's what you can do. And if you're a top performer, we want to retain you, but we aren't going to. We're going to provide you some growth opportunities as well. Otherwise, you'll go someplace where you can get those growth opportunities.
Right, and we're not going to lay out this profile that the only way to grow is to become a manager. Because
exactly.
I knew lots of peers that took that route because they thought that was the only way to grow and ended up going back into sales as individual contributors, making a lot more money, by the way, because they'd felt forced to. But once they found opportunities to stay as sales rep. So getting back to sales manager. So when you hire a new frontline sales manager, what's the biggest adjustment they have to make?
Well, the biggest adjustment, I think, is really clearly understanding what their job is. And as an individual contributor, their job is to go out and hit the numbers, to sell stuff, to close deals and to do it as quickly, at as high margins and all as possible. As a sales manager, your role is completely different. All the things that made you great as an individual contributor aren't necessarily things that make you great as a sales manager. Your role as a sales manager is getting things done through your people. So as contrast, I know if I'm a salesperson, the way I make my numbers is by going out, finding and doing deals. As a sales manager, I'm not responsible. I'm not the person that produces revenue. My people are the people that produce revenue. So how do I get each one of my people performing at the top level possible? How do I get each one of my people achieving their numbers? So that mind shift from going to what I know and was good at or great at as an individual contributor is completely different as a sales manager. It's all about getting things done through your people. Which really speaks to coaching at this point. What's the difference between managing and coaching? I think, I'll rephrase it a little bit. What's the difference between management and leadership? And I think, management is all about, I would say, the mechanics or even the business management side of things. It's about the analysis and understanding, my pipelines, understanding performance, understanding those kinds of things. Business management is really critical in a sales manager's role. But then you start saying, well, how do I translate that into getting things done through people? And getting things done through people really involves coaching. It says I have to understand each person. I have to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. I have to understand how to get the most out of them. Whether it could be each person has different behavioral styles, and I could go, be fairly tough and abrupt with a person because they appreciate that kind of directness, whereas somebody else may need a lot more hand holding and a lot softer approach. But, as a manager, my job is to maximize performance. My job then is to coach and develop them to each achieve what they could. Or those that can't perform is to move them to areas where they can perform, which may be out of the company. So coaching, as you're saying, is much more about leadership. I would say leadership is the combined aspect of business management and coaching. You can't do one without the other. I in fact, wrote a blog post today where I think a lot of people confuse this, is that I can be a fantastic coach, but if I'm coaching on the wrong things, we fail. I can be fantastic at business management. I can look at and say, our pipelines are crap. This is what we need to do to fix our pipelines. But if I can't translate that into changes in behavior and what my salespeople do, however great my business acumen and my business management talent is, we fail. So we have to approach both in balance. And leadership, I think, is that marriage of business management or business acumen with coaching and developing and knowing how to get things done through others.
Right. So you had laid out a number of rules for coaching, or just definitions, let's say, of coaching, talking about developing people's capabilities to succeed in their jobs, addressing their behaviors and attitudes. That's an important one.
Right. Right. So it really is. Coaching goes across lots of dimensions. It's their behaviors, it's their attitudes, it's their skills, it's their competencies. A couple of things. It is primarily directed towards their performance in the current job. If we do want to look at developing people for future jobs and future opportunities, but we primarily focus on maximizing their performance in the current job. Some things that I think scare people away from coaching is not about fixing people. We aren't shrinks. All we're trying to do is get them to perform as well as possible in the job. So it's not about fixing people and their deepest insecurities and the fact that their father, had too high expectations of them and they feel abused because of that. That's not what we do as coaches. That's what shrinks do. And that's not our job.
But actually there is, and we'll get into this in just a second, but I mean, there is an element of similarity in terms of the approaches of, let's say, therapists and coaches in terms of how they ask questions of the people they're coaching. Because as we talk about it, we're not, as a coach, you're not there to give people the answers. You're there to help them think, right, and come to conclusions themselves.
That's exactly it. There's in the book I talk about the difference between kind of directive and non-directive coaching. And basically, directive coaching is telling people what to do. Go make this call, do these things, then come back to me and tell me what happens. Well, and you
laid out some conditions when you want to use that. I think it's important. You should probably, you had three, I think, primary ones. You should lay those out.
Well, let me contrast that first. So directive coaching is basically telling. Non-directive coaching is getting people to think about things and helping them come up with the answers themselves. So clearly, if we want to have a sustained impact on people's performance, clearly we want to do as much coaching in a non-directive way as possible. The more we can get our people to think about something. So if I'm doing a deal review with an individual and that person is talking about the deal and I'm coaching them about, here's how you better qualify them. Here, what do you think we need to do to move this thing forward? What do you think we need to do to get better alignment around the buyers? How might we do some of these things and get the person to help discover the answers for themselves? What you build in that single coaching session around the deal is the similar thought process that individual will start applying to all their deals. So you get huge leverage from non-directive coaching, helping people figure it out themselves. But there's some times where you just can't do it. You either don't have things like the risk of error is too high, that if they did something wrong, it could have possibly very serious negative consequences for the customer or very serious negative consequences to the company. Or if there's tremendous time pressure. I use the example of if I'm a passenger and my salesperson is driving and the salesperson is about to hit a light pole, I don't want to go through a non-directive coaching exercise.
Socratic questioning about,
well, what do you think that light pole might do to the car and us? I want to say, put the goddamn brakes on and steer away. So I want to use the directive coaching technique. So there are some times, and the third. So I think, one is the risk or the consequences of failure are so high. Two is the time. The time is so compressed that you can't do it. Three is the mindset or the behaviors or attitudes of the person. Sometimes the person just has the wrong mindset, and the only thing you can do is tell them what to do. But again, these are all that kind of coaching technique doesn't have a lot of sustainability.
No, that should be exception based.
Exactly, but there, as managers, we have to leverage both of those, and we have to leverage them based on the situation, the person, and what we're trying to achieve, both in the short and the long term.
Yeah, But again, with the conditions you laid out in terms of, need for speed, eliminate risk, and why are we talking about this when the decision was made by the CEO already? Those tend to me, at least my experience, tend to be more exceptions as opposed to your day-to-day ongoing, which will be non-directive. And I think a great perspective you draw out in the book for managers who are doing coaching is that asking great questions is really like doing a great discovery call.
Well, that's it. I mean, what we do is one of the ways our careers as salespeople and individual contributors has helped us in becoming sales managers is hopefully we've become very good at asking great discovery questions with of our customers and helping them learn through that process. Well, that same approach and that same technique is something that we take into coaching our people. Just as we want to help our customers discover something and learn, we want to help our people discover something and learn. And so, I kind of jokingly say this, but most of us have learned spin selling at some point in our career, but we've learned spin selling from the point of view of how do we engage a customer.
Right.
We think of, well, gee, what if I take that situation, problem, implication, and need kind of approach and look at it in developing and coaching a person?
Yeah. I think absolutely. And I think sort of pursuant to that is that it's really important when you're asking these questions that they not be sort of the typical leading questions, but the actual discovery questions. You want to know the answer as well as you want them to understand what the answer needs to be.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too is we as managers we tend to think of what we are doing to our people or for our people, how we're helping develop them. But one of the things to keep in mind is in really good coaching, each person is learning a lot. Yeah, and as absolutely. Managers, we have to keep our minds open to say, what are we learning from our people? It could be we're learning how to become better coaches. It could be we need to shift our point of view that the salesperson has an interesting point of view, say, about a specific issue that we may have completely misread or misinterpreted, and those kinds of things. So it really effective coaching is really a good conversation where each person comes prepared to both teach and learn.
And at a sufficient level of detail that you really surface the issues.
Absolutely.
Because I think this is a problem I see a lot of times with managers. To my point about the leading questions, it's if you're a manager, you're going into a coaching session with your mind already made up about the answers you want to hear, and you ask these leading questions, you're not going to learn anything new.
Yeah, what I call that is basically a disguised sense of directive.
It is.
Coaching is where, the most blatant example of directive coaching is do this, do that. A lot of times managers are, put a veneer of, let me ask you these leading questions that have only one possible answer. And so in some sense, it's a form of directive coaching, which isn't terribly effective.
No, and to your point, and the point I always like to emphasize to managers is that, there is a wisdom of crowds effect going on here. Is that two heads are smarter than one. If you think you know all the answers, you're probably limiting your effectiveness as a manager.
And that's exactly it. And so that's why we both learn something. It's kind of a shared discovery. And the two heads better than one. It's how do we together come up with the best solution, whether it's how to reach a certain individual at a customer, how to get past gatekeepers or whatever, how to express our value proposition, how to drive a deal, how to prospect more effectively, or even, how to use my time during the week more effectively. Those are all areas of coaching that we get into these really powerful conversations. And I think the effectiveness is these conversations are applied not just in that situation, but then are lessons to be applied in every similar kind of situation. So whether it's this prospecting call, but lessons I can apply to every prospecting call, this deal, lessons I can apply to every deal, and so on and so forth.
So speaking about time, so what do you recommend relative to frequency of coaching sessions, formal, informal setting, one-on-one? What do you recommend?
Well, first of all, I think we need to get rid of the idea of a coaching session. And I think, we did some research a number of years ago, and as kind of an offhand question, we asked people, how frequently do you coach? And the majority of the answers came back once a quarter or less, which is clear, blew us away. And as we dove into it, we find that people think of coaching as they think of coaching in the context of the coaching session. So what we need to do is we need to say, how do we integrate coaching into everything we do? So if I'm a sales manager, I'm sitting down with my people every day doing deal reviews. And what I'm doing typically is I'm looking at it from a business management point of view. I'm looking at it trying to understand, what are we doing? What's the likelihood of winning the deal? And all those kinds of things. What do we need to do to win the deal? What I really need to do is say, I have a business management objective and I have a coaching objective in every deal review. So I take advantage of killing two birds with one stone. So I'm both understanding what's happening in the deal, but I'm coaching that person on how to develop a much stronger deal strategy, how to compress the sales cycle. What are the most powerful next steps? So we need to integrate coaching into everything we do. So whether we're doing deal reviews, pipeline reviews, call reviews, prospecting reviews, whether we're doing one-on-ones looking at their time blocking, we need to integrate coaching into that thing, so we have both the business management objective and the coaching objective. So we kill two birds with one stone, and we really focus and intensify the impact we have in coaching.
Well, you and I were both at a conference together. We didn't actually see each other there back in San Francisco earlier this year. And one of the speakers, fairly senior sales type at a high-profile SaaS company, basically scoffed at the notion of one-on-ones as sort of a quaint, outdated notion. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's garbage. I think it goes to this kind of mechanistic view that a lot of people are getting about, here's the script, here's, everybody's the same, and so on and so forth. But in reality, everybody's different, and the way to deal with people and get them to perform at their highest has to be individually based. There are some things that we can do very effectively with our teams. So team meetings and leveraging team meetings, to coach and develop people. But typically there we're looking at overall skills. So I want to improve, say, the prospecting skills of the whole team and lead a discussion on prospecting with the team. So we work on that. But if I want to develop the skills of each individual, because they're different, I have to address each individual.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. So last question on this topic before I go to the final segment of the show is how would you describe your own coaching style?
Autocratic.
Very directive.
No, and again, I think part of it is over the years and process of discovery is I think a very kind of, leveraging everything I can, using mostly non-directive, but where appropriate, some directive techniques. And I got to confess, though, I was very blessed when I went into my first sales management job. I was working for IBM, and IBM takes management and leadership very, very seriously. So almost before I had the chance to inflict myself on my new team, I went to 2 weeks of training. And there, the one message that still I think about every day is it's leadership and management is about getting things done through your people. So it's all about the people. And so I had, from the very first day I became a manager, some of the best training and coaching on management and leadership. And fortunately, that shaped me at a very early stage. I can't say that I didn't fall in bad habits where I'd get frustrated with an individual and I'd do all the wrong things. But, over time, when you get your teeth kicked in enough, hopefully you recognize that and you say, there are more effective ways to help develop our people.
Right. All right. Well, good. Well,
and I'm still learning as we go. So.
Well, yeah, we have to keep on learning as we go. I mean, so nearing the end of the show, and I always have some standard questions I ask all my guests. So you were on the show before, so I actually have some new questions for you. And the first one is, and you can give me one-word answers or elaborate if you wish. And the first one is it, in your mind, is it easier to teach a technical non-salesperson how to sell, or to teach a salesperson how a product or service really works?
That's an interesting question. I think I've always had surprisingly, but tremendous luck with taking non-salespeople and teaching them how to sell, given that they have the right mentality and framework, and it's something that they really want to do. Mm-hmm. Recently, I was coaching a team of very, very senior, experienced people. They moved. It was a professional services company, and they moved from delivery into business development. And so they understood the product, they understood the services, they understood the value proposition and all that very well. They just didn't understand how to go out and find customers and engage them. You start going through the stuff. Here's how high performing sales professionals work. And they listened and they paid attention. Whereas if I went and told experienced salespeople the same thing, they'd get bored and sit back, cross their arms, or start looking at their iPhones and so on and so forth and say yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. They don't listen. So these people didn't know what they should or shouldn't be doing based on mythology. The other thing, too, is, I've always found, a lot of these professions, if you think of it, the sales process, which is core to effective selling, is really a specialized application of project management. So I took these professional services people who understood and mastered project management and really could leverage that. And I'd said, all we're doing here is project management, but very focused on a set of applications. And you could see the light bulbs going off in their eyes. So I really like taking experienced non-sales professionals who really want to sell, again, mm-hmm. having that right mindset. I can get them up to performing faster than I can maybe get a salesperson to understand a very technical, difficult product.
All right. Good answer. One I agree with, by the way. So second question is, when you look at your own sales skill set, what's one thing that you need to improve?
I'm a master of everything.
Oh, there you go.
No, I think I need to continue to work on my patience.
Hence the answer autocratic earlier. Now it all makes sense. Okay.
Right. Is I'm a very heavy type A, and I move at a very, very fast pace and like moving at that fast pace. And I've noticed sometimes in my professional practice, while it's driven by good intentions, is I lose people. I lose people, I confuse them, and I lose my impact and effectiveness. And so as impatient as I am, as fast as I want to move things forward for all the right reasons, everything we do is a team effort, and the result of our work with our clients or our customers all arriving at the same place at the same time. So I need to continue to work on my patience.
Okay. So when we get together to ride our bicycles, are you going to be type A? Am I going to be struggling to keep up?
Well, I want to make sure I'm at least half a wheel length ahead of you.
At all times.
regardless of how much it's killing me.
Yeah, not that I'm competitive at all either. So that'll be an interesting ride. So next question. What's one non-business book every salesperson should read?
The most important one that's come to mind, and I'm a bit ashamed that it took me so long to discover it, is Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Oh, great book.
And it came out about, I'm trying to think, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I actually just discovered it this spring. And it is, everything that we do both in our personal lives and our business lives is really a reflection of our mindsets, and really whether we have the closed mindset or the growth-oriented mindset. And we have both operating in different situations at the same time. But I think what's been most impactful on my life, and as I start seeing other people, is mindset.
Excellent. Okay, last question, quick one. Favorite place to go on vacation?
Well, I tend to prefer kind of extreme or adventure locations. So what I end up doing is going someplace where my bike is always part of it, and I can do long bike rides.
Excellent. I've got a recommendation for you. We'll talk about after we're off the air.
Or I'm into kind of not mountain climbing, but comfortable mountain climbing. Sure. So I have a goal in next year to do Kilimanjaro.
Ah, very interesting. Okay. So you have some significant milestone coming up in your life?
It's whatever milestone my wife has for me.
Okay.
Coming up today. So.
All right. Well, good. Well, Dave, as always, pleasure to talk to you. And tell people how they can find out more about your book and about you.
The book is on Amazon. It's Sales Manager Survival Guide. There's also a special book site, salesmanagersurvivalguide.com, which has some excerpts, some testimonials. We've also used that as in the book, we refer to a number of special resources, things like the sales management ecosystem, the sales competency model, and so on and so forth. So people who buy the book can get access to those special resources at salesmanagersurvivalguide.com. And you can find me at Twitter at David A. Brock. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at my blog site, partnersinexcellenceblog.com.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Great. Dave, thanks again. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. Easy way to do that is to subscribe to this podcast. Accelerate on iTunes. Take a minute, do that, because then you'll make it part of your daily routine, whether you listen on your commute, in the gym, or as part of your morning sales meeting. And then you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Dave Brock, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.